Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Van Damme, Gibson, Snipes, Ford. When you make a list of the most popular action heroes of all time, there's another name that needs to be added to that list: Liam Neeson.
Take him to the melding chamber.
That's right. Over the last 16 years, Neeson has headlined a never-ending series of action thrillers that have propelled him to a much higher echelon of fame than he'd ever had before, with him only ever really becoming an action star once he turned 56. And in the end, it was all due to a low-budget European-financed action flick which came very close to going direct-to-video and reached theaters in Europe a full year before it ever opened in North America. That movie is Taken, and we're going to tell you how it ended up revitalizing the career of a man who, at the time, was generally considered a top-tier character actor with limited box office appeal. That's right, it's time to find out what the happened to Taken. Now, the story begins in the late 90s, when director Luc Besson was riding high off the success of The Fifth Element. Like his previous film, The Professional, the movie was a bigger hit internationally than it was at the domestic box office. In fact, a full 75% of The Fifth Element's revenue came from outside of North America. Clearly, there was a demand for American-style slick action films made with the European market in mind. Thus, Luc Besson started funding modestly budgeted action movies through his company, EuropaCorp. Besson, who was intensely prolific as a writer, would churn out scripts himself, often with a co-writer, and hand off the directing duties, usually to a French director. This formula proved to be a hit with Taxi, a French car chase thriller giving rise to a whole series of action movies. Soon, Besson was able to strike up a deal with 20th Century Fox for a series of action films to be done on modest budgets, in English with lower-tier stars. Along with his Fifth Element collaborator Robert Mark Kamen, he made a bunch of successful movies, including Kiss of the Dragon, which starred Jet Li, and The Transporter, which made Jason Statham an action star. While neither of those movies was a smash in North America, they did really well internationally and were major hits on the DVD market. What made Jet Li and Jason Statham's movie so profitable was that neither man commanded a massive salary at the time, as Li was still breaking into the North American market, while Statham was virtually an unknown outside of his appearances in Guy Ritchie movies. Eager to launch yet another action star, Besson had the idea to make a movie about a retired special forces agent trying to rescue his daughter from human traffickers. Rather than hire somebody obvious like Harrison Ford or Mel Gibson, he conceived of the film as a vehicle for Jeff Bridges, who'd never really done a major action film at the time. When Bridges passed, the idea was floated to go with Liam Neeson. At the time, Neeson's career was going very well, with him having recently played Ra's al Ghul in Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. But on his own, he was not known to be a box office draw. While he had dipped his toe into action with Darkman way back in 1990, throughout the 90s he was better known as a serious actor thanks to movies like Schindler's List, Michael Collins, and Les Miserables. He also played Qui-Gon Jinn in Star Wars The Phantom Menace. He had headlined a few big-budget movies, such as Rob Roy and The Haunting, but they weren't considered hits. Nevertheless, he had a very good career going as a serious actor. When he took on Taken, Neeson figured it was just the job. He fully expected the movie to flop, and no one at the time really took him seriously as an action star. Indeed, the budget was quite low, with it only costing $25 million. The director, Pierre Morel, had previously helmed an action film for Besson called District 13, which was acclaimed by action fans, but was more of a cult hit than anything else. One of the reasons Neeson actually took the role was that he wanted to do a more physically demanding part than usual, with him claiming that he was just happy to get paid to spend 4 months in France learning karate. One of the reasons the movie did so well with Neeson was that even though he was never considered an action hero, his casting being very against type, he kind of looked the part. I mean, this guy is 6'4" and also had previous experience in boxing, so it really didn't take too much to bring something out in him that audiences had never expected from him before, but were happy to see. With Neeson taking his training seriously, the film also benefited from a premise that struck a chord with people. Human trafficking was and is a huge concern, particularly to parents sending their children off for the first time on their own for the traditional college European tour, which is what happens in this movie. The movie kind of plays out as wish fulfillment to many, with Liam Neeson's Brian Mills, an insanely competent ex-Special Forces agent who uses his special skills to save his daughter, played in the film by Maggie Grace. One of the smartest things about Taken is how well constructed it is, with it taking a solid chunk of the running time before you ever realize that Liam Neeson's character is more than just a somewhat overprotective father. I still remember watching the movie in theaters on opening weekend and having the audience roar with approval during Neeson's first big action sequence. But funny enough, the movie almost never came to theaters in North America. Due to the way it was made, Taken actually opened in Europe in February of 2008, and it took a long time for it to ever get a North American release date, 11 months actually. It's kind of a miracle that the movie wasn't sent straight to DVD, as torrents of the film were widely shared on file-sharing services at the time. And in fact, I actually worked at a company at the time that did quality control for Blu-rays and DVDs, and I can testify to the fact that a DVD Blu-ray release of the film was locked and loaded long before it ever reached American theaters. Yet, the trailers for this movie really hit a chord with them, very well edited and brilliantly centered around the now famous scene where Neeson warns the men who have taken his daughter that he possesses certain skills that make him a nightmare for people like them.
I will find you, and I will kill you.
Every single person who saw that trailer wanted to find out what those special skills were, but the film wildly exceeded 20th Century Fox's modest expectations when they opened it on the notoriously sleepy Super Bowl weekend back in 2009. In fact, the movie opened with $24.7 million, which just about matched its budget.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
The word of mouth on the movie was very strong, and eventually it grossed $145 million in the US, which is still Liam Neeson's highest grossing movie as a solo action hero. It also became EuropaCorp's biggest box office hit to date, and it immediately established Neeson as an action hero, with critics praising his performance, even if they criticized the movie itself. His action stardom was solidified when he appeared in 3 straight action flicks that all made money: Unknown, Taken 2, and Nonstop. He became kind of the king of thrifty, no-frills action thrillers that could be made for small budgets, sported PG-13 ratings, even though Taken had to be edited down quite a bit to get a PG-13, and proved to be very profitable for movie studios. In fact, more than a decade and a half later, Neeson is still making them, although he's about to try to reinvent himself once again by playing the lead in Paramount's long-planned reboot of The Naked Gun. So that's what the happened to Taken. Basically a solid and simple premise coupled with outside-the-box casting struck gold for all involved. It also established a new trend where audiences seem to really take a liking to older action heroes, with many of the biggest names in the genre nowadays, including Keanu Reeves, Tom Cruise, Denzel Washington, all being north of 60. Several middle-aged actors tried to do a Neeson themselves, with Kevin Costner making 3 Days to Kill and Criminal, and Sean Penn even teaming up with Pierre Morel for The Gunman. But outside of Bob Odenkirk with Nobody, no one has really come close to striking the public's fancy like Mr. Neeson.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.